The early June sunlight filtered through the half-finished addition to Luke Mercer's cabin, casting geometric patterns across the plank floor. 3 months had passed since he and Nia had exchanged vows beneath the old cottonwood tree, its new leaves now fully unfurled like their tentative hopes for peace. Luke winced as Nia unwrapped the bandage on his right shoulder, revealing the angry red wound from Miller's men's attack 6 weeks ago. The bullet had only grazed him, but the wound refused to heal properly, reopening with each day's labor. Still angry, Nia observed, applying a fresh pus of yarrow and juniper. Her skilled fingers moved with practiced efficiency, a ritual they'd performed daily since the confrontation. Outside, Tala sat cross-legged on the porch, whittling a whistle while keeping watch over Shadow, the wolf pup she'd adopted from the winter pack that had attacked them. The animal limped toward her, favoring his left hind leg that had never healed properly after being caught in one of Miller's traps nearby. Buck grazed in the new corral, his ribs still visible beneath his coat. The harsh winter followed by spring conflicts had left little surplus feed, and the horses' recovery remained incomplete from the doorway. Luke surveyed their homestead, the freshly turned earth of Nia's garden, the reinforced fence line, the new smokehouse they'd built after their wedding. Progress but unfinished, like their healing, like their safety. The distant sound of hammering drifted up from the settlement below, where scaffolding still surrounded the general store after the fire. Miller's men had started the community rebuilding slowly, wearily, after standing with Luke against Miller's threats. "We're getting there," Luke murmured, more hope than certainty in his voice. "Day by day," Nia agreed, securing the fresh bandage. The morning's peaceful rhythm shattered at the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Luke's rifle was in his hands before he'd consciously reached for it, his body remembering the danger before his mind could process it. Tala moved to Luke's side, her own small knife held ready. Shadow managed a low growl, though he lacked the energy for true aggression. The pup's recovery mirrored Luke's own, functional, but far from complete. A lone rider appeared at the edge of their clearing, slumped forward on an exhausted horse. Blood darkened the left side of his buckskin shirt. The young man, perhaps 20, with features that spoke of mixed heritage like Nia's, swayed dangerously in the saddle. "You Luke Mercer?" the stranger called, voice strained. "Man who stood against Miller and his men last month?" Luke nodded cautiously, rifle not quite lowered. "Thomas Red Path," the man introduced. Himself then nearly fell as he dismounted. Nia moved forward to steady him. I rode hard from Fort Verde Miller's back with Colonel Bradley's men behind him. Not just settlers this time, real soldiers. Luke exchanged a look with Nia, the weight of this news settling between them like a physical thing inside the cabin. Nia treated Thomas's wound, a clean shot through the flesh of his side. Bradley's using what happened here to justify a sweeping action, Thomas explained between pained breaths, calling it pacification of hostile elements. They're rounding up mixed families, separating children from parents. "Why come to me?" Luke asked, though he suspected the answer. "Word spread about how you defended your Apache wife and her daughters," Thomas replied. "How you stood against both Miller and the wolves. People say you're a man who chooses right over easy." Luke's jaw tightened. "I'm still bleeding from the last fight. We barely survived Miller's men. I wouldn't ask if there was anyone else." Thomas said, "They've got my sister's family held at a temporary camp 10 mi south. They're moving them to the reservation tomorrow. Children to the mission school, adults to separate work camps." Nia's hands stilled on Thomas's bandage like they did with my mother's people. "This is happening because I took a stand," Luke realized aloud. "Miller's using me as proof that stronger measures are needed. Not just you," Thomas clarified, "but your defiance gave them the excuse they needed." Luke looked to Nia, saw the knowledge in her eyes. Their choices 3 months ago created ripples they couldn't have anticipated. "We just found our peace," Luke said, the weight of responsibility settling on his still healing shoulders. "Peace built on others' suffering isn't real peace," Tallis said unexpectedly from the doorway, Shadow at her side. "That's what you told me when you explained why you married Mother despite what others thought." Luke met his stepdaughter's steady gaze and recognized his own principles reflected back at him. "We'll need supplies," he said finally, "and help." The ammunition box revealed their vulnerability. Barely 20 rifle rounds remained after the confrontation with Miller. The winter's isolation and spring's conflicts had depleted their stores faster than they could replenish them. "Not enough," Luke muttered, sorting through what remained. Thomas checked his own pistol. 6 shots here won't get us far against Bradley's men. Luke's shoulder began bleeding again as he saddled Buck, the horse nickering in protest at being readied so soon after their last hard ride. Nia added extra padding beneath the saddle blanket to protect Buck's still tender flanks. "Bradley's men are different from Miller's," Thomas warned as they prepared. "Trained soldiers following orders, not just angry settlers. They believe they're enforcing the law." They rode to the settlement, where scaffolding still surrounded the general store. Fresh pine boards contrasted with the weathered siding like bandages on the town's own wounds. The fresh graves on the hillside. 3 settlers who had sided with Luke against Miller bore wreaths not yet withered. The blacksmith Jacobson hammered a new hinge with particular ferocity when Luke explained their need. "You asking us to stand against the army now, Mercer? We just buried our dead from standing against our neighbors. I'm asking for ammunition and supplies, not fighters," Luke clarified. "Same thing in the end," Jacobson countered, but his hammer stilled. "This territory is getting smaller for folks who don't fit neat categories. Miller's been through here recruiting for Bradley, painting you as some kind of race trader, turning others against proper authority." Luke leaned against the doorframe, suddenly light-headed. The ride had taken more from him than he'd expected. "You don't look fit for whatever you're planning," Jacobson observed, his tone softening slightly. "That shoulder's still not right. Don't have the luxury of waiting till it is," Luke replied. As they left the settlement with meager supplies, Luke noticed Shadow struggling to keep pace, the pup's injured leg dragging more noticeably with fatigue. Like everything in their lives, the animal's recovery remained incomplete. At the ridge overlooking the temporary camp, Luke's vision blurred momentarily, exhaustion and lingering weakness combining with the afternoon heat. His rifle wavered as he tried to count the guards. 8 men, Thomas whispered. "More than Miller usually commands. Too many for a direct approach," Luke acknowledged. They watched as a family was processed. Father directed to one tent, mother to another. 2 children led crying toward a wagon marked with a mission symbol. "We need to get closer," Luke decided. The descent proved his unreadiness. Halfway down, his boots slipped on loose shale, sending a cascade of stones ahead of them. A sentry turned, rifle raising. Luke's shot went wide, his injured shoulder throwing off his aim at the crucial moment. "Run!" he shouted as return fire kicked up dirt around them. They barely escaped, retreating to a hidden draw 2 mi from the camp. The failure weighed heavily as Luke rebandaged his now bleeding shoulder. "They'll be moving those families at first light," Thomas said, "and now they know someone's watching." "Someone recognized me," Luke admitted. "A man in militia gear, not army uniform, one of Miller's new recruits." By dusk, riders approached their cabin. Not soldiers, but 5 men from the settlement led by Jacobson. Their expressions were grim. Miller's brother arrived with news from the camp. Jacobson explained without dismounting. "Says you fired on army personnel. Colonel Bradley's using it as proof that you're inciting rebellion among the Apache. We were trying to help families being separated. Nia countered. Doesn't matter what you were trying to do. Jacobson said, They're coming here next. Not just for you, but for anyone who's helped you. This whole settlement's under suspicion now. Thomas stepped forward. I should have told you everything. I was there 3 months ago when Luke stood against Miller. I was scouting for my people. What I saw, a white man defending an Apache family against his own kind. I brought that story back to our camps. It gave people hope, made them less cautious. Some came out of hiding thinking attitudes were changing, and walked right into Bradley's roundup, Luke concluded. Jacobson dismounted slowly. I lost my brother in the last fight. Mercer can't say I'm eager for another, but Miller's men are telling folks they'll burn out. Anyone who ever traded with your family. That makes it everyone's problem. Shadow suddenly limped forward, growling toward the trees. Moments later, riders emerged. Miller himself with 10 men, a mix of settlers and hired guns. Looks like we found ourselves a meeting of sympathizers, Miller called. Colonel Bradley will be interested to hear about this. The first shots came without warning. Shadow leaped at the nearest rider despite his injury, taking a bullet. Meant for Tala, the pup fell, blood darkening his grey coat. In the chaos, Luke felt his wound tear completely open as he returned fire. Their retreat to the cabin became desperate, Nia half carrying him the final yards. This is your fault, Mercer. Inside, Nia worked quickly to stem Luke's bleeding while Tala cradled the wounded Shadow. Jacobson and the other settlers looked to Luke with uncertainty, their decision to stand with him now seeming catastrophic. We have until morning, Thomas said grimly. Then Bradley's men will join them. Winona appeared with water for Luke. Your wound is worse, she observed with a child's directness. Been reopening it since it happened, Luke admitted. Never gave it proper time. Like Shadow's leg, Winona said. Mother says wounds need rest to heal. Luke looked around the cabin at Nia tending Shadow, at Thomas checking their meager ammunition, at Jacobson's men positioning themselves at windows. Rest seemed the most distant luxury imaginable. Sometimes there isn't time for proper healing, he told Winona. Sometimes you just keep going outside. Miller's men had established positions around the clearing. Occasional shots struck the cabin walls, more to keep them contained than to breach their shelter. They'll wait for Bradley, Thomas said. More glory in a joint operation. Luke nodded, sweat beating on his forehead from pain and fever. Gives us tonight to prepare. Dawn approached without mercy. Luke attempted to rise but collapsed. Blood loss and exhaustion finally overwhelming determination. Can't even hold a rifle, he murmured, frustration thick in his voice. Then I will, Thomas said, checking Luke's Winchester. You stood for my people. Now I stand for you. Nia moved with purpose, mixing powders from her store of medicines. This will give you strength, she told Luke, but it borrows from tomorrow to pay for today. Outside. The settlement men argued among themselves. We should leave while we can. One insisted. This isn't our fight. Wasn't our fight when Miller burned the store either. Jacobs encountered. Didn't stop our people from dying. Winona appeared at Luke's side, Shadow limping behind her. The pup's wound had been bandaged, and though weakened, his loyalty brought him to Luke's feet. He won't stay back, Winona explained simply. A plan formed in Luke's fever. Bright mind. The wolf pack last winter. They circled before attacking. Miller's men will do the same. Try to surround the cabin. The traps, Tallis said, understanding immediately. Like the ones we set for the wolves. Not enough time to dig proper pits, Jacobson objected. Don't need pits, Luke managed, forcing himself upright with the medicine beginning to work. Need thinking like prey, not hunters. Thomas caught on. The creek bed west of here, narrow passage, high banks. They'll expect us to run north toward Apache territory, Nia added. Luke nodded, each movement painful. We make them think they're chasing us, lead them where we want them. Jacobson hesitated. Half my men want to leave. Then leave, Luke said without judgment. This isn't your battle. Wasn't yours either, Jacobson replied after a moment. Until you made it yours. He turned to his men. I'm staying. Rest of you decide for yourselves. 3 men departed. 2 remained. Not victory, but not complete abandonment either. If not now, when? Jacobson asked simply. Outside. A bugle call sounded in the distance, Bradley's men approaching. Time's up, Thomas said. Luke struggled to his feet, Nia's medicine lending him strength he didn't truly possess. Then we move now while we still can. Their preparations were desperate improvisations. Ammunition distributed 3 rounds per person, positions assigned based on each person's limitations. Shadow, despite his injury, positioned as lookout on the cabin roof where his growl would signal Miller's approach. Luke, propped against a support beam, coached Tala on using the terrain. Remember how the wolves moved, testing, watching for weakness. Men do the same. Nia prepared bundles of smoking herbs. The wolves feared fire and smoke. Men should fear it more. By mid-morning, Shadow's growl alerted them. Miller's force had grown. 15 men, now approaching with confidence. Bradley's men aren't with them yet. Thomas observed. Miller wants this finished before they arrive. Wants the credit. Luke agreed. His reputation suffered when he backed down before. They allowed Miller's men to believe the cabin was being abandoned. Glimpses of movement toward the north. A deliberate trail. Meanwhile, Jacobson and his remaining men circled behind to cut off retreat. Luke watched from the ridge as Miller's men took the bait, following the false trail toward the creek bed. His hands trembled, partly from weakness, partly from the knowledge that everything depended on timing. "Now he asked Thomas, who crouched beside him. Thomas nodded, eyes fixed on the approaching men. Born ready. The signal, 3 rapid shots, came from Jacobson's position. Miller's men, suddenly realizing they were being channeled into the creek bed, scattered for cover, but the narrow passage offered few options. Nia's smoke bundles, strategically placed and ignited by Winona, filled the creek bed with accursed clouds. Confusion spread through Miller's men as visibility dropped to nothing. The battle unfolded not with grand charges but desperate moments. Each shot precious, each position vital. Shadow, despite his wound, harassed the outer flanks of Miller's men, his wolf heritage making him a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. Luke, still too weak to aim effectively, directed the defense. When the smoke cleared enough for visibility, Miller's men found themselves exposed, caught between Luke's position and Jacobson's men behind them. Several threw down their weapons immediately. Others attempted to fight their way out, only to find themselves without clear targets or escape routes. The climactic moment came not with mass gunfire, but an intimate confrontation. Miller, separated from his men, came face to face with Luke in the narrow passage. Both men wounded, ammunition spent. They represented the personal nature of the conflict. "You should have stayed in your place." "Mercer," Miller snarled. "White man with white woman, Indian with Indian, worlds changing," Luke replied, steady despite his weakness. "Frontiers, not just about what we take anymore, but what we build together."